Hello everyone, I am Arena International Master Rishikesh Chavan. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss an interesting line for white against Benko Gambit. Benko Gambit is also known as Volga Gambit. It is named after the great player Paul Benko and the Volga River in Russia. So let's start. D4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5. This is Benoni kind of structure. B5, and this is called Benko Gambit. C into B5. So here white is accepting the gambit. Instead of accepting the gambit, there are few other options for white also. So these options are maybe he can play E3, or he can also go for knight D2 to support the pawn. He can also play queen C2, or there is one very interesting line which goes like A4, so B into C4. So this variation is called Sosonko accepted variation. Knight c3, e6, e4, into d5, e5. Here white has sacrificed a pawn to get some activity in the center. D4, into f6, and d5. Here black has sacrificed a full knight for two pawns. Knight b5, bishop e6. This position is considered equal because white has a piece. On the other hand, black has two extra pawns, and these four pawns, these four very oddly looking pawns, are very strong in the center. They are controlling lot of important squares in the center and around the center, and white is going to face lot of problems developing his pieces and launching an attack or building up a defense. On the other hand, black pieces are very active. After say f into g7 and bishop into g7, both the bishops are already active on these diagonals, and then black is going to castle soon. Then he will play rook e8, then knight c6, and rook b8 will also come. So all the black pieces are joining the attack very quickly. But on the other side, because of these four pawns in the center, there are very few squares available for white pieces. So white is going to take a lot of time to develop his pieces and move his king into safety. So that is why even though black is a piece down, this position is considered as equal. So let's move ahead. A6, f into e3. This is the main variation we are going to discuss today. But let's see, instead of f3, what other options white has. So maybe he can play something like b into a6. Then after bishop into a6, knight c3, d6. There are two main options for white. So he can play either e4. So after e4, black is going to stop white from castling. So after king into f1, white's castling right is gone. So white has to go for artificial castling. So g6, g3, bishop g7, king g2. So again, this position is slightly better for black because his pieces can come into the game very quickly. Black has these two open lines for attack. So after castling his rook can join the b file. Also, this bishop is covering the long diagonal. So there will be lot of pressure on these two pawns. So because of these reasons, this position is somewhat favorable or seems better for black. The other option for white over here is, instead of playing e4, he can develop his light square bishop through g3 square, g2 square. That way, white will be able to castle. So the game may progress ahead like this: g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g6, knight f3, nb d7, castles, knight b6, rook e1. Of course, white wants to play e4, but right now this pawn is pinned for the rook, castles, and e4. So again, this position is slightly better for black because of two reasons. One reason is that these two lines are still open for attack. The bishop is still assisting the attack, and then these two pawns will be a soft target for black. The second reason for this position being better for black is this g2 bishop looks very passive, or it's not very active because of these two white pawns in the center. So that way, this is suitable, or this is favorable for black. Let's move ahead. What else he can play? He can even play something like knight c3 in this position, or he can also play e3. to support this pawn. He can also play knight f3. Though knight f3 is not a very important move or not a very strong move in this structure, because these two pawns are under attack. So it's better if white plays something like knight c3 to support these two pawns. So knight f3 is kind of mistake in this position. So let's move back to the main game. f3, d6. Now here, instead of d6, black has few options. Black can straight away capture the pawn on b5. So he can play a into b5, e4, queen a5, bishop d2, b4, and knight e3. Remember this move in this structure. Knight a3 is a very important move. Of course, black cannot capture the knight because this pawn is pinned. And now after a3, white knight is going to settle on c4. From c4, it will be covering lot of important squares, and also at the same time he will be giving extra support to this b2 pawn, because after g6 and bishop g7, this dark square bishop will be attacking the b2 pawn. So for these reasons, knight a3 and knight c4 is a very interesting maneuver with the knight. So please keep this thing in mind. d6, knight c4, queen c7, a3, a6. So here after a3, white wants to resolve his queen side before black can develop his pieces. e6, black structs in the center. d into e6, bishop into e6, a into b4, rook into a1, queen into a1, d5. So black wants to open the center. Both the kings are in the center, but as you can see, black's king can move to safety after castling very quickly. So here black just have to move the bishop out, and then his king will be inside. On the other hand, white will have to develop these two pieces first, and then he will be able to castle. So white is going to take much more time to keep his king into safety. So that is why black wants to open the center. So he played d5, e into d5, knight into d5, and there is a very interesting move, queen a4. Queen e4, queen a4 is a very nice move. Knight d7. Of course, here black cannot play bishop d7, because then there comes queen a5, and now again this position is winning for black. Winning for white, because of course black cannot capture pawn into pawn, because then this knight is hanging. That is the main reason behind giving this queen a4 check, because the bishop is forced away from the knight safety. One more idea is here, he cannot play queen into queen, because then after pawn into a5, these double pawns are gone, and now this outside passer is very strong for white. Sorry. Also, black cannot play bishop into pawn over here, because of course he is losing a full queen. So this way, or this position looks very promising for white. So that is why here black is forced to play knight d7, queen a8 check, knight b8, and knight e3. So again this position is winning for white, because these pieces are sitting loose in the center. Then these diagonals are open. So here white is going to start giving lots of check to black's king, and then this queen is kind of overworked in this position. So we can say that this position is better for white. Let's move back. So d6, e4. So e4 is the main reason behind playing f3. So remember this idea, we are playing f3 so that we can play e4, and now we have a very strong pawn chain in the center. So we can use this pawn chain to stop black's pieces from becoming more active. So as you can see, this knight is not at all doing anything over here. Even this bishop has no squares available on the king side. A into b5, bishop into b5, bishop d7, bishop c4. Instead of bishop c4, white can go for bishop into d7. The idea is knight into b7, nb d7, knight c3, g6, Ng e2, bishop g7, castles, castles, and now rook b1. So here after rook b1, white is going to play b3, and then he's going to play a4. And now once a4 is played, he will be playing knight b5, and then the other knight will join him. And that way, this position will is very strong for white. He has that extra pawn. He also has outside passer. He can develop his bishop through b2, and he can also play queen c2 later on. One more idea is this rook, f1 rook can join the attack by through this f2 square. So white can play rook f2, and then he can shift this rook on the queen side. So that is why this position is very promising for white. It's kind of winning position for white. Let's move. Bishop c4. Bishop c4 looks kind of passive move, because as white center pawns are on white squares, this c4 bishop is considered as bad bishop. So logically it was good for white to exchange this bad bishop with the black's good bishop. But here the idea of preserving the bishop is, now as this square is not available for b1 b8 knight, and even this square is not available, that way this knight is misplaced. This knight will have to come over here. Also later on, black's idea will be to play g6, bishop g7, and then he will be moving this f6 knight on the queen side via d7 and b6. But as you can see, d7 square is occupied, it's not free. Then black will find it very difficult to shift these pieces on the queen side, and that way black will take a little bit more time to launch his attack. That is why bishop c4 is played. g6, b3, bishop g7, bishop b2, castles, knight e2, knight a6, castles, queen b6, and bc3. So here white's development is done, and now white has to be prepared against black lining up his pieces against a and b pawn. Rook f8 as expected, queen d2, ra7. So ra7 is a multi-purpose move. So either black can triple the pieces on the b file, or he can shift his attack on a file by playing rb8, f4, bishop g4, knight g3, bishop c8, e5. So this is according to the logic or the principle that of every wing attack must be made with the center thrust. So here black is starting his wing attack. Wing attack is successful only when the center is totally blocked. But in this position, as you can see, center is not at all blocked, and white is using that to launch an attack in the center. Once the center is open, then these pieces will be very misplaced. Knight e8, opening the bishop's diagonal, and at the same time giving some extra support to d6 square, and ce4, and ac7, into d6, bishop into b2, queen into b2, and now here knight into d6 is forced. Here black cannot play e into d6, otherwise knight f6 check will be very strong. Knight into d6, queen into, again forced. If he plays something like pawn into d6 over here, then there will be knight e4, and now this check will be very dangerous. Then king will have to move either on g7 or h8, and then there will be discovered attack or discovered check coming up on the king. If after knight f6 king moves on f8, then white is getting this pawn for free. Also the rook e1 will join the attack. So it's very dangerous position for black. That is why after knight into d6, black is forced to play queen into d6, knight e4, attacking the queen, d8, queen d8, d6. Again white's plan is to remove the support of this pawn. So this e7 pawn is supporting this square. So white wants to remove this pawn. So once black plays pawn into pawn, he can start giving knight f6 check, and again all the attacking chances will come into the scene. Knight e8. Knight e8 is again a very good move. Black wants to defend this square at all time. Pawn into rook into e7. Capturing the pawn with the queen is a bit risky, because later on white can play, suppose if black plays queen into his e7, then white can play rf e1, and then again there is a threat of discovered check, so queen has to move again. That is why here black captured with the rook. But now this c5 pawn is hanging, there is no support for the c5 pawn. Knight into c5, queen b6, pinning the knight, queen f2, immediately unpinning the knight, knight d6, bishop d3, bishop f5, bishop into f5, knight into f5, ra e1, attacking the hanging rook, or not exactly hanging, but we can say the rook is kind of soft, it is supported only by the knight. Rb e8, knight d7 is the very important move. Here the queen is under attack. If he plays if black plays something like queen into queen, then white is going to play king into queen, and again there are two supports on the rook. At the same time, knight f6 check, and this rook is gone. So this is a very threatening position for black. So forced queen into f2. Black wants some time to cover his weaknesses or cover the targets. So he exchanges the queen. King into f2. Rook d8. Rook into e7. Knight into e7. Rook d1. Now again this discovered check is coming up, and this rook will be lost. Also, as you can see, there are two connected passed pawns on the queen side, and these are outside passers. Outside passers are always stronger than center passers. Rook e8, attacking the passers. A4, rook c8, knight f6 check, king g7, knight e4. Now this position is already a clear winning position for white. He has two extra pawn. He digested that gambit pawn which black offered in the opening, and he also got one more pawn in the middle game. So that way he got two pawns, and both the pawns are connected, and these both the pawns are outside passers. So white just have to coordinate his pieces well, and then he will start pushing the pawns one by one, and it will be very difficult for black to stop both the pawns. f5, rook d7, king f8, knight d2, king e8, rook b7. So now b pawn or the b3 pawn is secured by the rook, so he can start pushing this pawn ahead, and if black attacks this pawn, then he can support this a5 pawn with the b5 pawn. That way both the pawns will start moving ahead slowly. Rook c2, king e2, rook c6, a5. White started pushing his passed pawns ahead. Knight d5, g3, rook e6 check, king d3, h5, and now b4. So after b4, black resigned in this game, because there is no way to stop both the pawns. Maybe black will have to sacrifice a piece or two to stop both the pawns. Even if he sacrifices the piece, his position is not good. He cannot hold the position because there are still lot of pawn remaining on the board. So what white can do? White can start capturing these black pawns with his extra pieces, and then he can get three more pass pawns on the king side also. So that is why black resigned in this position. As you can see over here, the key move we discussed here was f3. So let's go back with the move order again. D4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5, b5. This is Benko Gambit. So here we are going to accept the gambit by playing c into b5. a5. Black is going to offer one more pawn. Now here, instead of capturing the pawn, which is the main idea behind black's sacrificing the pawn, we are going to play f3. So keep this idea in mind. The main plan behind f3 is to play f4, so that this c3 knight will be free for other duties. Otherwise, this knight will have to sit on c3 all the time to defend the center pawns. So that is why here we can play f3 and then e4, and then you will have to develop the g1 knight via e2 square, and then maybe to c3. Also, later on you'll have to play rook b1. These two files will be open very soon, and black will launch an attack through this open a and b files. Also, this bishop on g7 will be giving some extra pressure on this two pawns. So that way it's better to move this a1 rook away from the target zone. So white will have to play rook b1. So these are the few key moves. Whenever you are studying any opening, you will have to memorize the key moves or key position in that opening. So which piece is going on what square, and which piece has to do what duty, that you'll have to remember. That way you can remember more positions. That way you can master any opening. So I hope you enjoyed today's session. If you enjoyed the video, please like this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe our channel. We'll be bringing you more such videos very soon. So see you till then. Thank you very much, everyone.